Thanks, everyone. My name is Mao Amis. I'm going to be facilitating this next session that is focusing on SME finance and support ecosystems in South Africa. And we've really seen in the last session, we've seen the enterprises, and I'm sure they're still in the room. That with the excellent work that they're actually doing within the space of the just transition in Mpumalanga. And being an entrepreneur and a business owner is not, an easy walk in the park. According to the World Economic Forum, about 67% of SMEs globally, as we speak, are fighting for survival. The statistics show that SMEs fail within the first, 20% of SMEs fail within the first 2 years. And by, 5 years, they are normal. So 70% are normal. So it's a really challenging space to work in as an entrepreneur and a founder. And it's really very important to ensure that they are provided with all the support that entrepreneurs require. And one of those ways to build an effective innovation ecosystem is how different actors within the ecosystem operate. So if you're well aware, an innovation, when it moves from, if I think about technological innovation, the ideas usually start at the university, usually either as a thesis or just an idea at the university level, an R&D, and that eventually has to find its way out to the market. And so from a financing perspective, there are different financing mechanisms that are required to supporting SMEs, whether it's from a grant perspective to issues to do with patient capital in terms of impact investments, in blended finance, all the way to venture capital when a typical innovation gets commercialized. And really, for a typical innovation to move from R&D all the way to commercialization requires effective innovation ecosystem. And that means that the universities have to be able to produce all the research, all the innovators, whether they're sitting at universities or in their garages somewhere, they have to produce those ideas. Those ideas have to find a product market test. We need to support from the financing, investors, essentially from investors. You need, the regulators to be on board. It's not a journey that can be walked as an individual. So it gives me so much pleasure to welcome some of these people who are part of this innovation ecosystem, who are really working with SMEs on the ground and trying to enable SMEs to scale up their operations. And so on my panel today, I have Res Kanju, whom we've already heard from. Res Kanju, can you join the platform? From Indalo Inclusive. Clap of hands, please. And we have Carla Hudson from the Mpumalanga Green Cluster, who is an agency that's working on the ground. And finally, the guy with the big check, Maluta Nesaula from Nedbank. You're welcome. All right. I think Grace has already spoken. So, Carla, let's do the ladies first, then later. So, just as an opening remarks, can you just introduce yourself? Because I haven't obviously done any justice in terms of introduction. I'm so sorry. Sorry. Don't move out.
So you can come in.
Wow. What do I say? My sincere apologies, Maluta. But I'm glad that you're okay. I'm glad that you're okay. Things happen, eh? Yes. I think it's a sign. I think it's a sign that we're breaking the rules of this dialogue. We're absolutely going informal, from speaking from the heart. You said it without saying the rules. Thanks, Maluta. I apologize once more. So anyway, Carla, have you caught your breath? Oh yeah, there's a mic here. Here. Yeah, you can use it. We're all confused now. Yeah, so just take a breather in and out, and introduce yourself or briefly, as you know, in opening remarks. Then we'll come back later with other follow-up questions around what you do at the Mpumalanga Agency and so on. Thank you.
Great. So thank you for waking up the audience. I'm Carla Hudson from the Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency. I'm the program manager. And what we basically do is a collaboration and a facilitation platform to make sure that projects doesn't fall between cracks, and making sure that there is collaboration between projects, that we don't overlap. And so basically that's what the agency is doing. As you all know, there is a lot happening in the province, and trying to just bring some direction and some focus into the province with the 4 clusters that we are focusing on, which is water, renewable energy, circular economy, and sustainable agriculture. Thank you.
Thanks. Go next. Yeah, sure. So just introduce yourself briefly and what that you do at Nedbank.
Yeah. Besides falling on stage, yeah, I'm Maluta. I head up the green economy portfolio at Nedbank. We fund SMEs in the green economy space, focusing on agriculture, energy, water, as well as waste. Thanks.
Thank you. You can pass over the mic to Rest. Rest, unless you want to introduce yourself, but my question to you, can you just provide us with an overview of the SME landscape in Mpumalanga, so you can ground people, because I'm aware some of our visitors are going to be going there, an understanding of actually what's happening within that space.
Thank you very much. I think I like the choice of words, Dr. Amis, the landscape. So, and I want to liken that to a village. So I grew up in an typical African village in Mpumalanga, in Bushbuckridge. And we always had an expression, I think it happens, everybody in Africa has this expression. It says, it takes a village to raise a child. So I look at the landscape as a village. And the characteristics of a village is that you've got different characters, you've got different role players. And Mpumalanga, it's very interesting because we have a number of institutions and entities that collaborate and work together. I think if you talk SMMEs, as Mao says, the landscape, at least one of the big elements and the big objectives of the landscape is to try and develop these SMEs. And in that, there's a number of entities that are involved. That's the first thing. But just like in a village, if you're raising a child as a village, you need to agree that you all ascribe and subscribe to similar principles and values. And I think what we do have, and we're very lucky in Mpumalanga, that we are guided by policy at the high national level, and I think the PCC plays a critical role within that space in the province. But most excitingly, I think for me, in particular, and I'll be biased on this one, is the introduction of the Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency. All of us can do what we want to do, but if there's no coordination, and I think Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency gives us that opportunity through which and within which we can be centered and be coordinated. And of course, within that space, you you have Dardlia that really at the provincial level is able to translate national policy to province and understands again that particular space. But we also then have a number of players, and it's actually quite good that we have those number of players, which are intermediate organizations such as ourselves. And if you look at the coal mining regions up in the Highveld, you also have quite a lot of institutions that are operating within that space, and that's good. But I think one of the things that we've got to be cognizant of all the time is how do we coordinate color? How do we ensure that we all subscribe to the same principles and values? If we are saying it takes a village to raise a child, we should understand that this child doesn't belong to one family, it belongs to all of us. And therefore, we should claim the successes. And where there's failure, we should all come together to guide that child to get into a space where that child also becomes a success. And so therefore, the entrepreneurs that are in this room, who also form an integral part of this particular village, and the community and the landscape of Mpumalanga, are so critical. If we don't take care of them, we run the risk that indeed our province, which indeed has the highest concentration of coal mines in the whole landscape of South Africa, the reality is these SMMEs are going to die, and they are our future. So I think in a nutshell, that's what for me, the landscape dynamics are. But also at the same time, you also deal with local municipalities. Maybe as a last point I must mention, local municipalities that require a lot of capacity support. And of course, bearing in mind that within that space, there's a myriad of challenges that they face with, from lack of, physical and fiscal resources, lack of expertise to actually implement some of this. Municipalities that are still battling with just in terms of interpretation of what the transition means, that are entangled in all sorts of political dynamics. If you are part of South Africa and been following South African politics, just the whole concept of a government of national unity on its own, it's a complex thing, to deal with. So you have those as well. So I don't want to talk too much, but I think I've painted enough for now. Yeah, right?
Yeah, so go back to you, Carla. You've initially mentioned about the mandate of the MGCA. I just want you to maybe to provide the context to the audience. What do you anticipate to be the economic impact of the transition on the region, particularly, and what the MGCA is doing to support the work of entrepreneurs in trying to preempt that potential negative economic impact of the transition away from coal to much more inclusive and greener economies?
Thank you. Yes, how I see it is basically also taking the historical aspects of South Africa into account. It's a legacy in South Africa that the communities actually has never benefited from our resources, and I think now is the time to really work towards that. That everybody actually benefits from our rich natural resources. So basically, what we are doing is really throwing the net quite wide to really understand how we can get this right. This is something brand new. I know it has been mentioned that it took 70 years in Europe to get this right. So we unfortunately don't have 70 years. So I think this is an exciting journey. But just sitting here with these people on this day today is really positive, because that is really need to open conversations. I historically come from the mining industry, and I know that decisions for communities gets made in a boardroom and then gets taken to the community. And I think that has fundamentally changed, that we really need to learn from the communities. They are the people that has got the knowledge and that cultural understanding of what is necessary. And I think that's what we would like to do, is really bringing private sector, communities, and academia together. We are working on quite exciting projects. The one project that is really close to my heart is a coal mine. I don't know if I can mention their name, but basically a coal mine, open pit, that was rehabilitated, and then in partnership with a private commercial farmer, has actually been producing safe maize with mine water and on mine land. So that is ready for commercialization, and that needs partnerships. We can't do that on our own. Then there's other projects like the Brugspruit project that is just north of Mpumalanga, where there's lots of opportunities for SMME. So it's basically taking traditional commercial mining or industry into a new perspective and out-the-box thinking. And that's what we would like to facilitate, and bringing all the people with all the knowledge together, that we can really get a uniquely South African solution, and hopefully expedite the timing.
And just a follow-up, I know that the most vulnerable, obviously, are going to be the communities around women and youth. What are you doing specifically to close that gap so that, as we transition, no one is left behind?
So specifically in minorities, and specifically as a female that was in the mining industry, I really understand the effect of closing of mines, of closing of industry. And I think there's a big focus, and especially on the donors. We are working with 3 donors that's actually really focusing on the skills development and actually translating what is a just energy transition, because I think there's a lot of confusion. What exactly are we talking about? And when you talk to the communities, because there's been so many voices and not one voice that's been telling the story, there's a lot of confusion. And I think in November, we are planning workshops to really explain what is the problems that has been identified, hear from the community what is the problems that they actually identify, and then the positives that can come out of that. And there's, just the SMMEs that's here today, the innovation is absolutely amazing, and hopefully we can be that vehicle and really helping to get the spade in the ground.
Thanks, Carla. And Maluta, you come from Nedbank. Nedbank is one of the big 5 banks in South Africa, and I'm also aware that the green economy is a new space. So the banks are not necessarily suited to invest in this space. Can you just illustrate to us what is the motivation? What is your driver to be a key player in this space? And also, how do you grapple with the issue around generating pipelines? Because ultimately, you need investable SMEs to invest in. What is your motivation?
Yeah, I think obviously we invest in SMEs in terms of we're all about wealth creation and sustainable job creation. What I'm allergic to is like guys in other fundraisers and consulting companies and the mines that would approach us for these large-scale projects, where, like you said, they've decided and make all these things, plans and budgets at the boardroom. And then when you start to interrogate the numbers and who's actually benefiting from this project, is usually everyone else but the community. If you're going to do things like in agriculture, as low-value crops, at a big scale, 2,000 hectares, 5,000 hectares, it makes sense. But when you look in terms of the number of beneficiaries that are going to benefit from that, the community is not much. The implement providers, the input provider, the service provider, everyone else, and the fundraiser, they make money, but not the people. It's almost like, you're using them again, which is quite a sad story. But from an entrepreneurship perspective, like the guys that were here, the 16, we really invest in those ones, because those ones individually you can channel investments, you can build the capacity, you can create the equity, and from early stage, what Dres was talking about when he was on stage, from ideas all the way to led growth until they sort of start to unlock commercial funding. When they're investor ready, when they're bankable and all those things. So our pipeline is usually the entrepreneurs, because these large scale projects, I haven't seen one that appeals to me, especially that has to do with agriculture, because I'm also an agricultural economist. So when I look at these things, I really go into the numbers, into the financial models, start to question the intentions And then also, who's going to be benefiting from these things? So we try to shy away from those type of projects. But it's not to say that there isn't other opportunities. It's just a matter of guys understanding in terms of what are the unlocks to wealth creation, and then maybe we can start to talk. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much. I want to make this an interactive platform. So if you have any questions in the audience, please raise up your hands for clarity, and so on, then we can come back. We're going to do back and forth, so that you can just keep it informal and so on. I want to go back to Rest. Rest, fresh from university with a degree in chemical engineering, and I see that, South Africa has 50% unemployment. There's no chance of me picking up a job. But I see there's all this hullabaloo around this new sector, around the green economy. How would you guide me as, a fresh founder who wants to enter into this space, wants to start a business, wants to bring the skills to build up an enterprise that is scalable, that is impactful in the long term?
Yeah, first of all, I would say you need to go really find a job. Because the entrepreneurship space is a very long, lonely journey. It's not an easy space. It's not automatic that you come out of the degree and then say you become an entrepreneur. It's a very difficult one. And I do think that entrepreneurs are made also by circumstances through which they find themselves in many times. So if you compare, for example, East Africa, North Africa and South Africa, the gap is quite big in terms of entrepreneurial activity. And the difference between these 2 or 3 environments I'm mentioning, it's a few things. One is, and I'm coming back to your question, Mao, it's education and skills. The levels of literacy and numeracy, amongst individuals, as in comparison to what we have as a country. So while I'll say to a chemical engineer graduate, go find a job, I'll also be encouraging them, and I'll be excited to actually work with that person because, once we've found out that they have an entrepreneurial spirit within them or traits within them, that's the right person to work with because that person has actually gone through, a robust process of training and acquiring a particular skill. And we need those kind of entrepreneurs. I always say to our entrepreneurs, there are 3 hurdles that you've got to overcome as a South African entrepreneur, especially in the townships. One is the language. So when I say language, I'm actually literally talking about the English language. How to converse, how to communicate in that language. Because the investors don't speak Zulu, Shangaan, Xhosa, or Pedi. They speak English. So that's why today you're going to hear entrepreneurs that even though they don't speak excellent English or, whatever, they really are going to be pitching in English today. And you think that's a small thing, but it's a huge issue for our rural communities. The second thing is also what you're talking about, Mao, skills and education. You've got to overcome that. All our entrepreneurs, education and learning doesn't stop because now you've started a business. You've got to continue to equip yourself and learn and continue to learn, more especially in the sector that you've chosen as an entrepreneur. Because what value is it to say I'm an entrepreneur and you're not acquiring education within that space? The last one is culture that you've got to overcome. So what I mean by that, and I'm sorry, but madam, I must not apologize because I'm South African. You've got to deal with the cultural issues that and barriers of business, which among others is how to relate between Black and white communities. White communities will mostly have the resources and they may just need to become your customers. How do I sell my product to that community? And I'll give an example of an area and a space that I know very well, the tourism sector. A majority of our tourism products are actually still in the hands of the minorities because of the land ownership regime in this country, and I'll spare you the details around that. And therefore, the people who determine who buys and what they buy are actually of a different culture to us as suppliers of goods and services, or as aspirant suppliers of goods and services within that space. So if I need to be selling to this particular culture of people, I, as a South African rural black young person, as a chemical engineer, have to learn that culture. For example, I've got to learn how to shake a hand. I've got to learn that I need to look at the person straight in the face instead of looking down, because the sign of respect in my culture says, if I respect you, I must look down. In this case, I must actually look at you in the face and in the eye, and we must connect. And that's a cultural issue. It's not an education, it's not a language issue, it's a cultural issue. I need to understand that I need to sit down with you and actually have wine and play golf with you. It's a flippant cultural issue. I need to know how to go hunting, you know, I need to know how to operate the 458 and the 452. You know, if I don't understand those things, it's a cultural issue. I need to know how to eat biltong, you know. So those are things that are crazy to think about, but it's a cultural issue. So an entrepreneur needs to understand those things. And if I'm going to work in Asia, the same thing. I've got to understand that culture. I've got to pause there now. But I think, let me say this. We need in South Africa, and I'm glad as an academic yourself, you've asked this question. We need huge investments. Devin Pillay, you know, from the PCC, you know, talks a lot about this. We need huge investments on skills and education in this country, and we've got to be serious about it. It takes at least 25 years, you know, for a child to move from birth to become a productive member of society. And that time can only be shortened, and it can only be that amount of years if the right skills, the right education is actually inculcated in those people. So we're dealing with those kind of challenges. If I want to go and introduce simple things such as, you know, a pitch deck to a community and of group of entrepreneurs that have never operated a computer before, you can now understand that education is big, you know, it's a big issue. So, yeah.
Thank you, Rex. I think that you point to a couple of things. And one of the major issues you've highlighted is that some of these barriers that entrepreneurs face are systemic. There are barriers beyond what an entrepreneur can do. And I think also it illustrates to some of the pointers that were raised yesterday that this needs to be an economy-wide transition, one, because it's not just something that happens within sectors, and secondly, that our economic model as we know it is broken. So sometimes we might start the conversation there. Basically, the system is rigged against your average entrepreneur who came on stage here. So what do we need to do to make sure that the system is in their favor? Because language should not be a barrier. Culture should not be a barrier. You know, so what do we need to do? So those are some systemic challenges. And I think that's the importance of understanding how the innovation ecosystem works, how you bring in different stakeholders to listen to some of these challenges and find ways of unpacking them. I honestly want to hear from the audience before we come back to our panel. Any burning questions, comments from our online community, if there's any questions as well. There's no questions. There's a question over there. Are you going to speak in Spanish or English? Because we might need a translator. Yeah.
Sí. Muy buenos días para todos. Una de las preguntas que tengo para los exponentes es muy fundamental.
Can I beg you to just hold for a second so I can get a translation for our panelists? It will be on channel 3 for those who want to listen. Yeah, just put it. So you put it here, then channel 3. It will be on. The translation, I think, will be on channel 3. So you just insert your speakers on the side, and on the side you can go channel 1, 2, 3. Hello. Yeah. Good. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Bueno, una de las preguntas que tengo es muy fundamental para el desarrollo de las mini pymes y felicito a Sudáfrica por ese desarrollo y ese emprendimiento.
I'm so sorry, the translation doesn't seem to be working. Is anyone getting? Everyone getting? It's not working for me. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Bueno, prosigo. Es muy fundamental saber la etapa productiva, competitiva y de sostenibilidad, aprovechando las necesidades del mercado. Son un desafío grandes para las mini pymes que se han conformado. ¿Qué estrategia y seguimiento de parte de ustedes tienen previsto para que no fracasen en el intento o se mantengan así para ampliar el mercado y no sea un mercado nada más local, sino que también comiencen a incursionar en las exportaciones de sus productos o de la visión que tengan ellos como mini pymes y no se queden nada más en pequeñas empresas, sino que tengan un crecimiento progresivo?
I think we all got the question. I don't know who is directed to, but I assume to Rest and Baluta, it's around SME scaling up and how we can expand the market for SMEs beyond the local, market as we see, to even explore, in this case, regional or focus on export as well to be able to access other broader markets. So it's the issue of growth. Let's just pack that in there and then take 2 comments, 2 questions more, and then we'll come back to this. Yeah, here in front here. Yes, please. Dr. Suez.
Okay, thank you very much. Greetings, everyone. My name is Zakele Maya. I'm the chairperson of the Just Energy Transition based in Grootfontein at Grootfontein Power Station. I just want to make a follow-up, maybe just a comment and then a follow-up based on what Maluti has been saying. We have taken very keen interest on what really happens with the entire JET funding opportunities that are taking place. Just for interest's sake, Maluti, if you look at an example of the funding that came through the platform of the Just Energy Partnership of countries like the US, the Netherlands, and other European nations that are funding, 70% of whatever amount of money that they've put in for just energy transition does not reach even communities where just energy transition is happening. It's money that goes back to either suppliers and producers of manufacturers of original equipment in their home countries. So the impact we're not seeing, even though the commitment might be 8.5 billion that has to be invested into just transition in South Africa, but we don't experience all of that. And if you go and check now, there's a study that has been made. A lot of money has been made, but the impact is very minimal. And we are in the space, we are in the area, we've got SMMEs that are under severe distress, because remember, as we speak, the transition has started. We have areas like Komati and ourselves, about 50% capacity has been lost. And we're really battling. Do you perhaps have any sort of advice in terms of how can we really turn that situation around so that really the funding that exists is really at the heartbeat of where just energy transition is happening, and we can really begin to see the impact? Because we're worried that by 2050 we would have transited, but there would not be justice in the kind of the transition that we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have another question over here. One question there and then in front here. Yeah, at the back here. Yeah.
Thank you. Ade Chayat from Indonesia. My question goes to Rest Kanju. Yeah, it's actually back to your presentation earlier. You put the one of the criteria for SMEs to get support is those in coal value chain, right? And that's actually bring me to one of my reflection in just transition is about multiple level of transition. So because of coal transition, then SME need to transition their business, right? So my understanding is that your program facilitate the SMEs to transform, to transition their business from coal value chain to outside of the value chain. And my question is how is your experience in dealing with that? How difficult, yeah, to facilitate that transformation? And the question is because I believe, I mean, reflecting to the situation in Indonesia, coal business considered as lucrative business. So anything connect to this industry usually earn a good revenue. Yeah. So then I assume that your challenge is how to come up with new opportunities for those SMEs go outside of that value chain, but maybe it will be hard to find those that is more, let's say, profitable, yeah, than their existing business. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take this final question in this round, and then we'll refer back to the panel. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. The name is Shamuari Ketano from an entity called the Green Loop. We are based in Standerton, Mpumalanga. Mine is actually not a question, but a plea to Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency, Nedbank, and also my brethren, Rest Kenju. Congratulations on the awards that you won by McKevin Ayaba as an ecosystem player. So we give thanks for Indalo for the work that they are doing. Mine is just to say that, within Mpumalanga, prior to the just transition and initiatives that emanate from there has been ecosystem players that helped entrepreneurs. So in terms of enterprise and supply development, if I can just make a quick rundown, we had Zivoli that played a role, we had Leap, and then we had Angel Resources recently coming in. And then we have this at our TVET colleges, we have the Centers for Entrepreneurship. So the Centers for Entrepreneurship, we have Mpumalanga University as a Center for Entrepreneurship, we have Hertzebande that also have a Center for Entrepreneurship as a TVET college, and Entlanzeni that has a Center for Entrepreneurship rapid incubator. Nkangala is in the stage of setting up a Center for Entrepreneurship rapid incubator. And then you look at corporates that are having a footprint, obviously the NBI, which is a bigger fund, but they have a program running in the province which focuses on installation, repairs, and maintenance entrepreneurs. And then you have your Ellen Gray Makers program that focuses on electrical engineering and plumbing enterprises. And then you have also incubators in the province. We have the Fourth Industrial Revolution Incubator, which focuses on 4IR and technology. We have your Lesedi, which is an agricultural incubator. We have MASDT, also another agricultural incubator. We have the Mpumalanga Steel Initiative, which focuses on the steel value chain. We have Timbali, which focuses on agriculture and also the flowers. And then we've got FinTech, as an incubator. From the government side, within and then also Vulingondo, as an incubator that focuses on tech. And then the support for entrepreneurs from the government side, we have your NYDA, and then we also have CIVDA. But importantly, within the Department of Economic Development, there's a section, Enterprise Development, which ran a program, Mpumalanga Youth Entrepreneurship Program, which greatly supported entrepreneurs and partnered with the South African breweries on that. And then recently also our premier launched the Mpumalanga Youth Fund as a means of ensuring that there's access to funding. And then we have the Mpumalanga Economic Growth Agency, MEGA, as an agency. So in terms of ensuring the success of our enterprises to become sustainable, this one, it's a plea to say that these ecosystem players are there. It's either we can do an ecosystem map, or alternatively, pull in these other players so that we can have a meaningful impact on our entrepreneurs as a collective, so that there is real true collaboration within the space. That is just, and it's not the first time that this plea comes. We had it with, yeah, it's not the first time on all platforms. We always request for this collaboration amongst ecosystem players. I do give thanks, Pastor Fari.
Thank you so much. And I think that is a very important comment you actually make, and I'll open it up to the panelists, but it basically piggybacks on one question I was going to ask Rest, because in your earlier presentation, obviously say that it is a rigorous process to select the best entrepreneurs. And the first thing that occurred in my mind is like, obviously entrepreneurship is a journey, you know? So how do these different actors work stage in stage before the entrepreneurs qualify to be on your program? They have to be at some ideation initiative or sitting at a university. And so how do you close this pipeline so that really we can hand over these entrepreneurs from one actor to the next in a very smooth way? So maybe you can comment on that, generally including anyone on that issue. Then we'll come back to the issue around market expansion and so on.
Okay, you thrown me a curveball, Mao, there, but thanks. I think maybe let's start with you, Shamwari. You know, the the issue of ecosystem collaboration, it's a real problem, and that's why in my opening statements I talked about Mpumalanga Green Cluster. I think there's a huge task ahead of you, Kala, and knowing that there's a lot of limitations as well within Mpumalanga Green Cluster, because we've got a particular focus and mandate. When we want to talk about ecosystem collaboration, you know, by ecosystem players, specifically in the SMME incubation space, it's a big problem because all of us are fighting for access to resources and funding, and we try and package ourselves, you know, with as unique suppliers and providers of a particular service, and you see the next person as possibly an enemy, which is it's a concept that really baffles me. Like I have no idea, you know, how we get to that space. One of our biggest success stories as Indalo, if anyone were to tell you, is that we became what we are, you know, after 8 years of existence in this country, to have grown exponentially, primarily because of our ability to collaborate and partner with us. We don't work alone, and we refuse to work alone. And that's why we have an MOU with Mpumalanga Green Cluster, for example, and we don't see anyone as an enemy. And I think this idea that other people are competing, it's actually quite warped, you know, at least from an entrepreneurship point of view, because no entrepreneur works without partners. So if we are entrepreneurs and supporting entrepreneurs, we have to learn the concept of partnership. We have to understand it and be implemented. In the interest of time, let me move to the second one quickly, then I can hand over to my colleagues. Allow me to respond to the question, my brother, about, you know, the multiple levels of the transition, and that's quite correct. You know, I think maybe because today we have a focus on coal mining regions. Fact of the matter is the following: the people who get retrenched in those mines, or people who work in those mines, majority of them don't come from these communities. They come from elsewhere. You know, they come from outside those spaces. They come from South Africa's 9 provinces, and we're quite a very big country. They come from the Eastern Cape, from Limpopo. In fact, they actually also come from other countries, by the way, you know, Mozambique, Zambia, you know, Zimbabwe and others. So this tells you that our levels of intervention in as far as the transition is concerned has to be multi-layered. It's got to be, you know, multiple geographies focus. So yes, we talk about core regions, you know, in entrepreneurship development and support, but at Indalo, we actually have programs that cut across different ecosystem and landscapes in the country. And that's very important. In fact, also across different value chains. And that's important. And our focus is on green and social. One of the interesting things when you talk about, and I'll answer your question and my brother's question around issues of scale and stop there, is the issue of how do you ensure that there is scale, how do you ensure that we intervene at different levels? So recently, we talk about this whole thing now of pipeline, you know, where how do we identify a pipeline? Maluta is looking for, as a bank, and it's not just him, In fact, I think our South African banks are quite easy. If you go to KWV, if you go to the big banks, the investors that Zakel is talking about who are bringing this money, they're not coming to look at the tomato farm or a maize farm or like a small thing in this country. We're looking at companies that can absorb billions of US dollars, right? Not 100,000 rand, not 200,000 rand, not 1 million. I mean, the IDC itself, which is our state-owned bank in this country, well, not bank, but state-owned development partner and funder, they're not interested in stuff that is below 15 million rand from a commercial point of view. And how many of our entrepreneurs, even these guys that are here, how many of them actually can absorb 1 million rand? None of them can absorb that money. And yet, a lot of these programs that are incubating are very scared to actually work with these kind of people because that space is quite risky. It's a very risky space. So it's almost like, as a last point, you want everyone to go to heaven, but they've never been to church. I don't know how that works, but anyway.
Osmosis. Yeah, over to you, Carla.
I'm going to address how to sort of develop the opportunities and the export part of that by using an example of a project that we're actually we are actually developing. We actually spoke to an expert at the CSIR on tire waste. And basically it came out that all the waste actually goes to Gauteng, outside of the province. So all the finances generated from that is actually leaving the province. And it was actually mentioned that there is so much opportunity because countries like Eswatini, Mozambique, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, even Zambia doesn't have the economies of scale that South Africa have. So basically, we need to, once again, collaborate with broader than just the province to actually get to projects that is economically viable. So it has been suggested that the province then becomes a hub for the repurposing of waste tires. But in order to do that, we obviously need to look at our transport network, our ports, and all of that. So it is definitely also a collaboration then with your local municipalities and your province, and making sure that there's capacity, that the municipalities can actually understand what is needed to make sure that you can actually develop these opportunities outside of just the community. So I think from our side is get the right players on board, collaborate, making sure that the infrastructure and the support systems is actually in place. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Do you want to address the issue around market expansion and where you see the entrepreneurs going, whether
but
export?
I think for us it's like a comprehensive, or holistic package. With entrepreneurs or SMEs, you need to do quite a lot of work. That's what we spend most of our time and resources on, building capacity. And we work through partners, right? Like Indalo is a partner in my portfolio, and we invest through them because we trust and believe that they've got the resources and they've got the track record to prove that in terms of the work they are doing in SME development, in job creation, etc. Part of that, what they do in their bouquet of solutions and resources, it is market access. They even go beyond that into matching them with investors as well. Some even outside that come outside the country. So it's a whole, it's about giving all the tools to these entrepreneurs that then allows them to be able to do that. Some of them sometimes just, like for example, in the fashion space, for them to be able to access international markets, they need to go to a trade show in Europe or wherever, if you are in fashion, bags and whatever. But it's so expensive, it's so bloody expensive that no one really wants to fund them. Then they become sort of stuck in this, in wherever they're coming from, and it sort of hampers their growth. And then if I can go to my brother there, hey, it's Rafe. It's rough, to be honest. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, we always, I mean, I get proposals all the time from different people, and they've got big stories, they've got visions for us, you know, in the communities and Black people. And you're like, my man, this is not gonna work. Where are you getting these numbers from? How's maize or soybeans, even if it's bloody GMO, gonna help to empower people, you know? But the thing is that, I mean, unless if you push back, but also it's about finding the right partners that are going to be able to do that. It's about who are you able to identify that will able, maybe, because part of the work that needs to happen is to like engage the community, you know. So it's just to make sure that there is that engagement. Otherwise, from an implementation perspective, it becomes a problem. And from a social risk perspective, if these things are not working, you know, we're at a boiling point at this point. We need to make sure that these investments that are coming in, flowing in the name of just energy transition or just transition in general, they are really, you know, they really mean it, that they're going to empower people. They are going to do all that stuff. There's things that mines and all those things were supposed to do, but hey, you know, but our people are at the back foot. They don't have electricity. There's no load shedding, but they're getting load reduction, right? There's no water out there. 8 million people in South Africa don't have access to clean drinking water. And that seems to be okay. I think it's time that we take charge, you know, look for the right partners. You can reach out to myself and Rest and Carla, I'm hoping, you know, then we can see in terms of how do we do this. Obviously, when they come there, they need to engage with you. Otherwise, what's going to happen? It's also about ownership. When you're going to, like, if it's farming, they're going to do a farming project. Who's the owner of that project? What types of entities are going to own that? What is the management structure? Who's going to be the trustees? You know, what's going to be the different strategies to make sure that this thing is sustainable, job creation, etc., etc. So it's quite important. It's not an easy space, but it's one that I think it's about time that we sort of take charge. We sort of tell people what we need. You also need to enlighten yourself. Information asymmetry is also a thing. People will come and say, we're going to do these things. If you don't know about it, you're going to buy into it, only to find out you've signed your life away, so to speak.
Yeah, Ray, something has been triggered in you, yeah?
Can I quickly just, I think also the project planning is very, very important, that right from the beginning, before the project actually starts, there's an understanding that there would be a localization and a skills transfer. Because I think many of these projects and I mean, I think I'm going to ruffle some feathers, but there is a north-south divide where the north thinks, you know, they it's coming to help us. And I think there has to be quite clear from the beginning that there needs to be a skills transfer. And then also very importantly, we must move away from our culture of just taking the raw material and exporting it. We really need to ingrain in our thinking of how we can actually do the value add, take the grain and make milli meal out of it, or tomatoes and make tomato sauce. I mean, that's a very simple example. But really, I think the project plan right from the beginning, and I think that's also an issue, I think, where Indalo can assist, is really to assist in that project, that right initial project planning, that we make sure that 70% of the funding doesn't leave, that it actually 70% stays. So that's quite important.
I actually want to address this elephant in the room called scale. Scale for who and for what? And what is that? I think we have a problem, right? And I'm going to talk from a South African perspective. So this whole thing of we want people who can scale and we want people who can, you know, because that's what is called bankable, investable, whatever, right? It's a very Silicon Valley type of mentality where you're looking for tech companies that can really grow big and you can invest big money. I'm sorry, unfortunately, in South Africa, it's just the amount of education and levels of skills, we just don't have Silicon Valley type of skills in this country. I mean, it's only now that we're introducing AI, computer sciences into universities and all that type of stuff, only now in recent years. And we're still very, very early stages, and the kind of innovation that's required for mega scaling that is somehow defined, it's very difficult. In fact, in South Africa, we're not like the US, where someone is going to be investing lots of money for 5 years, trying for you to have a pure proof of concept, and there's millions of dollars that is being invested. We don't have this kind of money in this country to actually keep on investing on concepts that we believe in, that we think, it's fine if they fail a couple of times, they can iterate a couple of times. Those resources don't exist here. We battled to get 50,000 Rand. I mean, that's why we're so grateful to GIZ, for example, and Nedbank, who comes and say, we believe in that pipeline development. And in fact, we should also accept and agree. Zakele says, we're going to transition very soon. Some of these things are going to close, and people are tired. And you say, we don't have 70 years. And that's true. But the problem is we've got to understand that this entrepreneurship thing is a journey. Somebody was outlining something this morning, and I don't know how I bumped into this video. But he gave an example of something like it took 30 years, for Microsoft to develop to where it is, at least to actually become profitable, 7 years for Facebook to actually generate revenue. And they give those kind of examples, right? But if you look at those 30 years, 20 years for Amazon and 7 years for Facebook, it was a lot of money that was being pumped into those initiatives. And they failed a couple of times, right? Do we have an ecosystem in this country where we can allow failure, and a reputation and trying of innovations? Unfortunately, we don't. There's a lot of research and IP that comes of universities. Unfortunately, universities own that kind of IP. They own it. Mao, it's your fault. You're an academic, but they come from that space.
I'm a recovering academic.
Recovering academic. The universities own that type of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff. I mean, we have one entrepreneur two of them that my heart pains up until today. We have a model, and it's my last input at the CSIR of a technology on acid mine water drainage, right? BN Aqua, sitting there at the CSIR, a lot of money was invested in that whole thing. The entrepreneur who did that struggled to get a mining company just to adopt him to pilot this thing. Unfortunately, he went back to full-time employment for a mining company where he signed a non-trade agreement even if he resigns, right? He can't trade in a similar thing, but now he has to earn a living because his family is struggling. His house got repossessed, his cars got repossessed, but nobody bought into that thing. He needed about 30 million Rand to get that thing off the ground. 30 million Rand is nothing to some people, but it's a lot of money here, right? And that's just one example. In the interest of time, I can give you so many. So what am I trying to say? There is a huge need in this country to develop this kind of entrepreneurs that we're identifying now and allowing them to be incubated over a period of time. And most importantly, telling them that, and this is what we do with Nedbank, we want 5 jobs in the next 18 months from you, we want 10 jobs in the next 36 months, we want 30 jobs in the next 5 years from each one of you. If out of 16 enterprises were able to each get an average of 30 jobs in the next 36 months, do the maths, right? How much money do we need for them to actually grow that space? We probably need about 5 times what we're investing now to get to that space. But it's very difficult to find that money, just that amount of money. It's very difficult. So it's important that we get a lot of these guys across the country. I mean, if you go to all of these African countries, we laugh, but you'll have a shopping mall in a major street, but next to this shopping mall, there's a secondary shopping mall owned by local people, right? Of small businesses that operate, right, across that street. You know Uganda. You know how it operates in Uganda. It's a 24-hour environment. Go to Maputo, go to Ghana, Accra. You'll understand that the economy works differently, right? Because you have a proliferation and a plethora of young entrepreneurs who are doing all sorts of things, and it's okay for people to be doing that, right? And we should get to that space as a country. I'm not saying we should be haphazard in our development, but I think we should get a lot of these guys doing all sorts of small things in the next 5 to 10 years. Then we're going to be a different space.
Thank you, Rex. I think you deserve a clap for that. And our time is almost up. And just to make a follow up, in relation to this ecosystem and the funding, I think that we also need to see any resources that are invested in this space as catalytic, just to promote that level of innovation and activity on the ground. That's really, you need those resources to be thrown at. Otherwise, when I went to university, which was, 15 or 20 years ago, I studied environmental science, and people were like, what are you going to do as an environmental scientist? Because everyone thought you'd be a chemical engineer, rather a doctor, an engineer, and so on. And now environment is the cool kid in the house. So I think it's really important to see this in the longer term vision, that we are in this on a journey. This investment might not sometimes trickle 100% dollar to dollar on the ground, but they are catalytic. One investment is going to unlock another opportunity and build on top of that. But I would like to give each of the panelists really 30 seconds to give your final thought, and we cancel this. Yeah, I think as you're done.
Yeah, I think for me, I just want to say, I think let's call out the BS, bullshit in full. Let's call it out. It's happening a lot. I think international investors, you are here. I think you need to align yourself with people that have got the right intentions. A lot of our people are hurting. A lot of our people are poor. A quarter of the population is food insecure. We've got the agricultural sector very much untransformed. We've got waste, only 10% is recycled. This is half of the global average. So it's quite bad. But someone once said, we've got too many problems to be unemployed in this country. Thank you.